Hello, friends. Today I talk about a topic which is very much in the news, that is artificial intelligence or AI. This video is different from other videos I have presented so far. This is the discussion about an experiment I did regarding AI. So let's jump into that. What was the experiment all about? So I basically gave few prompts to Gen AI tools, namely Microsoft Copilot, ChatGPT, and Google Gemini. I then compared and contrasted the response to see if their responses are consistent with each other or there are significant differences. If there are differences, what are the key points of differences? And if there are similarities, how are they similar? I also used some trick questions, like there was one question where I asked them to pick up a favorite Gen AI tool. This was to check whether they display some inherent bias, like would Copilot recommend itself, would ChatGPT recommend itself, would Google Gemini recommend itself. So I tried those things also. So let's now jump into the questions right away. So the first question I asked was, what are the key benefits of AI? And all the tools talked about the automation of repetitive tasks, reducing human errors, and such things. So there were similarities in the response, but slight nuances also. Gemini and ChatGPT talked about handling tasks which are hazardous for humans, dangerous tasks, and they also gave benefits to societies overall, like helping visually impaired people and things like that. ChatGPT and Copilot also prompted to check to ask us to prompt it to classify these benefits by industry. And Gemini provided that classification by default. Gemini and Copilot do not suggest any further prompt to talk about disadvantages. ChatGPT does suggest asking for disadvantages in further prompts to give a um, balanced view. So this is very interesting actually. The next prompt was the converse. What are the key disadvantages of AI? So there was quite a lot of similarities. All the tools talked about displacement of jobs, inherent bias and discrimination by AI, privacy concerns, and cybersecurity concerns. It was interesting to note that Copilot also talked about autonomous weapons. It also talked about AI being an existential threat for humans. So it does cite uh, even more grave dangers. Gemini and ChatGPT were a little bit nuanced in their, or one can say diplomatic in their response. They both mentioned that AI has many benefits or AI is very powerful um, before beginning the discussion on harms. But Copilot right away jumps into the harms. And ChatGPT and Copilot further suggest that one can prompt to do a deep dive on industry specific or situation specific harms and how to mitigate them. Gemini, on the other hand, suggests to look at regulatory frameworks around the world to handle risks coming from AI. So the next prompt was to ask them to analyze and compare the three tools which I'm researching. So I was very happy to see that none of the tools showed a bias towards itself. Like Copilot doesn't recommend Copilot, Gemini doesn't recommend Gemini, or ChatGPT doesn't recommend ChatGPT. And each one does a very comprehensive analysis consisting of several points outlining which context or situation is each best for. And the situations cited are also similar. For instance, all three analysis point that Microsoft Copilot may be best for workplace productivity, ChatGPT may be best for overall usage, and Gemini may be best for research. So the responses are largely similar. And in this case, I this was probably the only question where I didn't see much of a difference in any of the responses. Next prompt was, do you have a personal favorite among the three GenAI tools? This was one of my favorite questions. It was a trick question. I was kind of pushing GenAI to pick a favorite and check whether it displays any bias towards itself. Like, does Copilot recommend Copilot? So I was happy to see that they didn't take the bait right away, and they were balanced in their responses. They each one of them talked about the situation or context in which a particular tool would do best, and they all do a very detailed and comprehensive analysis of this question. The responses and analysis, like I said, was similar. For instance, all three feel that Microsoft Copilot may be best for workplace productivity enhancement, whereas Gemini may be best for research, and ChatGPT may be best for overall experience. So the responses are similar. ChatGPT does, towards the end, say that if it had to pick a favorite, it would be properly itself because it's best overall, but it does give a very good nuance stating that it's best to use multiple AIs depending on the situation and not just rely on one AI always. Lastly, one more difference was that ChatGPT and Microsoft gave more detailed or in-depth responses. ChatGPT's response was around 1 page long, and Copilot almost touched 2 pages, whereas Gemini's response was very crisp or brief, I can say that too, and it was around half a page or a couple of paragraphs long. So my last question was, are we seeing the golden age of AI currently? And what does the future hold for AI? So it's interesting to note that Copilot and ChatGPT asserted that we are probably at the beginning of the golden age, not the peak, and the peak is yet to come. On the other hand, Gen AI tool Gemini asserts that many experts believe we are indeed in the golden age of AI in 2026. Each of the tool provides detailed reasonings for its assessment. As far as ChatGPT and Pilot are concerned, ChatGPT compares the current period to the iPhone 1 moment and not the era of ubiquitous smartphones. Copilot compares the current period to start of internet era. Gemini feels that we are in the golden age because it feels that AI is now doing substantial business transformation and AI is present everywhere. Now, each of the tool talks about various avenues which AI can expand and improve into. ChatGPT, interestingly, also mentions key risks in the future, whereas Copilot talks about actions governments may take to regulate AI. Gemini does not touch upon this, but talks about volatility in valuation of AI specific companies. So it's very interesting. The responses, they all talk about the future having a lot of emphasis on AI autonomous agents. They talk about AI becoming invisible like an accepted part of our day-to-day life. Quite very interesting responses. So what was the result of my if experiment, if I may call it that? So I don't think any tool displayed an inherent bias in any of the questions which it answered. And I was even happy to see that AI is able to handle trick questions like the one I asked about, do you have a personal favorite among the three GenAI tools? And they didn't show any real bias in this and were objective, so they didn't take my bait. So Copilot and ChatGPT show greater similarity with each other than with Gemini. Largely, the responses are similar or um, to, yeah, I would say they are similar to a great deal. However, there are important nuanced differences. That's very important. Like, for instance, the question about having a personal favorite in the Gen AI tools. Microsoft Copilot even goes on to assert that it does not have favorites like humans do. So, which I thought was a very intelligent response. Other tools don't make this point. So there are some limitations of my experiment or so I'm just one person. I did this experiment in a given location in a limited time. So doing this experiment in different geographies by different people may be a more objective and detailed method of doing this experiment and would lead to stronger results. Now, as we all know, there are many tools of Gen AI in the market, not just the three I considered. So, adding more tools to the experiment would also improve its quality. Again, like I said, I am one person with limited time, so I only asked 5 questions. That's not a lot, I agree. Asking more questions, probing further, would have led to better results. Another thought process was that an experiment has to be repeatable. So I should have really repeated these questions over a period of time, like asking the same question again and again, and done this experiment repeatedly and see if the results are consistent. Last, I just wanted to say it's not like a research paper or a detailed statistical study. It's just my own experiment, which I did for fun and learning. Lastly, I'll conclude with some ending notes and disclaimers. The opinions expressed here are my own and not of any organization or entity I'm part of or have been part of. This is really not meant to be a critical evaluation of the three tools for any user, and no way do I endorse or reject any tool. Of course, use your own discretion and common sense while using AI. Its responses can be wrong. And as I always say, I'm not perfect. Feedback and suggestions are welcome. So thank you very much. Hope you liked my video. And if you liked it, try your own similar experiments and let me know the results. Thank you and have a nice day ahead.